Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you on this Tuesday. We've got a full lineup today. We do it every day. We don't just show up and crinkle the newspaper and look for what the headlines are. Do a lot of research, a lot of input, put out great content. As Maury Gaston says, good red meat and potatoes content sports. That's what we do. That's who we are. 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, 2 hours a day, basically 50 hours a month. So, hey, we need this. We need your support, like all shows and businesses do. Go to the sidelines.live website, hit that orange Patreon button, and join IPTAM. I pay $10 a month. I pay $10 a month. It's easy, so easy. I can do it. Jethro Bodine can do it, and we'd love for you to be a supporter of Sidelines. This allows us to go to all these events, bring on and get the equipment and travel and do everything we do. We're different. We are all sports, all college, football, basketball, baseball, recruiting. So got a great one today. Tommy Kane will join us in just a few minutes from Atlanta with ACC report. And I'm interested to hear his take. You know, we've been talking about this a lot in the fall, in all for months, years. Florida State to the SEC. It's suddenly story out there yesterday that Florida State's athletic director made a point. Look, this revenue sharing in the ACC is insufficient when compared to the SEC and the Big Ten. Now, the Pac-12, they may not be around if they don't get their act together. Larry Scott, previous commissioner out there, did a lot of damage. And now you see Southern Cal and UCLA last summer bolting for the Big Ten. That's not going to help. And Florida State had their chance in 1991 when Bobby Bowden was the head coach. Pat Dye and all the SEC coaches tried to get them to come into the SEC. Bobby Bowden famously said, there's more than one way to skin a cat. He felt that his path to playing for and winning a national championship was not easier, but more likely in the ACC than it would be in the SEC. The SEC versus ACC in regular season competition, it's fairly close. Don't get caught up. There's two ways. You can always look at what happens in bowl games, but look at regular season play. I know Georgia is dominating Georgia Tech now, but historically, look at SEC football in the regular season versus ACC football. It's probably 55-45, 50-50 maybe. Florida State, what they said, same thing Clemson says. We're pulling in a huge portion, lion's share of the revenue for the ACC. And they better be, this grant of rights deal that the ACC has with ESPN, it's all the way through 2036. I don't know who put that together. I do, but why they put that together. But contracts are broken and, rewritten all the time. Look at any football coach signs a 7-year deal. The next year he has an undefeated season. They're going to renegotiate that contract. Somebody out there text me why the ACC can't renegotiate their grant of rights contract deal with ESPN. ESPN likes it because they've got that conference locked in through 2036. The problem with that is the ACC may look a lot different if they go all the way to 2036 with this current contract. The SEC, just 2023 will be the last year of that contract with CBS, which pays the league only $55 million a year. Now, what we're told is this new deal with ESPN and Disney is going to pay the SEC $300 million. Now, I'm kind of trying to figure this out. The revenue from TV with Oklahoma and Texas coming in should increase that. But what I want to know is the Big Ten put together a contract this past year that's paying about $1 billion for TV. Did they do the end around and pass the SEC? Because they're now about 70% of the television sets in the geographical footprint that is the Big Ten. Wow, that's 70% of the TV sets. That doesn't mean they're all going to be watching, but, and again, convince me that LA TV market and the Pac-12 never was able to get a deal with DirecTV to carry the Pac-12 network in the Los Angeles, Southern Cal area. That's a one or two biggest TV markets in the country. Explain that one to me. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But Florida State, if they were to leave the ACC, that would be a crippling blow. Yes, Miami is in the ACC, but Miami is not going to be, I don't see them becoming who they once were. They've been trying to do that for 20 years. The last time they played for the national championship was 2002 when they lost after the game to Ohio State. Now, they played for it from 83 to 02, probably 10 times. They won 5 of them. Watch out on this Florida State story. There are 2 things I think that are in play here. One is, I think Florida State, their athletic director, is trying to wake up his fan base and say, look at these SEC schools that we're surrounded by. Florida, our in-state rival, LSU, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, right on top of us. Look what their boosters shell out every year. NIL on top of that. Look at the facilities and look what we have. That's going to scare people. And I talked to Tommy Kane yesterday, bring Tommy on in here about it. NC State has a lot of money. All those engineers over there in the Research Triangle, look at their football stadium. Look at the facility. Look. I mean, a lot of people are so myopic, they don't look outside of their own comfort zone, their conference. But Florida State, Clemson, NC State, they have money. But I will say Florida State gets the least amount of money from their supporters for a school that's won 3 national championships in the last 30 years of any school that I can think of. But Tommy Kane, ACC man in Atlanta, you saw the story yesterday, Florida State. I think it's 2 things going on. Again, their AD's trying to rouse up their fan base to give more money. And number 2, he's trying to send a message to the ACC commissioner, go renegotiate that contract that goes through 2036 that's paying us a lot less than the SEC and the Big Ten. And if we can't renegotiate that, we may look elsewhere. What did you think about those comments? We've heard them before, hadn't we?
Yeah, I think we've heard them before. I mean, I think I don't know. To be honest, Rob, I don't really know what to think of it. Like, to me, I feel like maybe they're trying to play poker a little bit with everybody, just saying, hey, kind of trying to call the bluff and say, let's see if we can get more money out of all this thing. But I don't know. I mean, yes, the ACC is behind on the revenue and everything compared to the other conferences. But there's a lot of politics involved with all this. It's not just, you can't just it's not like you can just sell your house and walk down go to the next neighborhood over and buy a new home. I mean, it's not that easy. It's correct. It's a lot more behind it. So we'll just have to see how it all plays out. I don't know what to think of it, to be honest with you. I mean, I know Florida State, you always hear those rumors about especially what was it, a year ago or so, when all the different conferences were expanding and UCLA was leaving and everything else. Everybody was going all everywhere. I mean, every day you picked up the paper. We don't do that anymore, do we? Yeah. Every day you get on the internet and and there's like 4 or 5 different stories about, well, who's going where, what's going to happen. Or Clemson's definitely leaving. Everybody's like, Clemson's out because they're too powerful. They're too big for the conference. Florida State's next, all that kind of stuff. Who knows what's going to happen, man? I mean, we'll have to wait and see. But I do think that there's always going to be speculation and rumors, especially the powerful teams that have done well on the national spotlight and the big schools like the Clemsons and stuff like that. If we were talking 10, 15 years ago about this, it wouldn't be Miami and FSU, right? That would be who you were talking about. So,
well, you know what, Tommy, and I didn't say that saying that the ACC, you said they're behind in revenue. Of course they are, but it'd be like you or me, or in a business, your biggest client or two of your biggest clients call you up and say, look, I'm not happy with the service I'm receiving. I'd like you to, be able to populate all my tax records so I can do them here or there. You go address that. I don't know the ACC commissioner. Phillips came from the Big Ten. But this is the question. I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. You're very smart. You know that climate. Why not go renegotiate that grant of rights contract that the ACC has? Because you've got powerful brands and you've got a huge population base that is the ACC footprint. And why not get somebody that knows how to market in the Northeast, that can penetrate and go deeper into the Boston market, the New York market? And bottom line is, Notre Dame in the ACC as a full-time member would be a huge, as my kids say, a ginormous shot in the arm. But what I think will happen here, you're going to hear this. And last summer, you're right. Every day there was a story about new speculation. But what could, if you were the commissioner of the ACC, what would be on your agenda on the first week of business?
I mean, I think the first just try to keep everybody in the conference happy, right? I mean, I think that would be the first agenda. Would be like, I mean, try to play the kiss babies and shake hands and go around and make sure everybody's kind of happy and do what you can. And I think that what you're going to probably find is that all the schools, especially the ones that, like you said, don't have as much money and is coming in, that they're going to say, hey, let's renegotiate our thing. And as a commissioner of a conference, you have to represent your conference. You have to represent the teams that are there, the schools that are there, and what they want, and what they feel. I mean, you're kind of the spokesperson, so to speak, of that when it comes to this negotiation kind of stuff. So I think you got to go back to the table with the contracts and just see what you can work out. I mean, look, I've always lived my life, Rob, as you got to give them a chance to say no, right? You got to go in there and see what you can figure out and work out with all this stuff, because ultimately, I think, unfortunately, but this is where the business is these days, is it is a business. College sports is a business, and these schools want all the money that they can get and that they think they deserve. So I think my first point of business would be just try to calm everybody down a little bit, try to get everybody on the same page and go at it together. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I like what you say in sales, make them say no.
Right.
I totally agree with that, because a lot of people are scared to ask. Well, what does it hurt to ask? But if I was the ACC commissioner, I'd say, look, man, we're from New York, Syracuse, all the way down to the tip of Florida. Look at that population, the I-95 corridor. There are so many. And I think about Georgia Tech right there in Atlanta. What if you were the president or the AD at Georgia Tech? What would be on your agenda in that market, which to me, Georgia Tech is turning into Tulane, DePaul up in Chicago, Temple in Philadelphia. And that's a shame, because you go out to Grant. I've been to Grant Field many times. I've been to Alexander Coliseum. That's a shame, because their alumni have an absolute billions of dollars that they make. I think Georgia Tech produces more millionaires than any university in America. Huh. How many of them are being asked to support athletics? But then again, how many of them have been asked and they don't see the commitment? I go to Atlanta a lot. Mallory lives there. She's an Alabama grad, but you're there. How important is it to your Georgia Tech friends that they're competing for championships in football and basketball, and they got a hell of a baseball program too?
Right. Right. I mean, of course they want to compete. Of course I mean, they're all. But here's the thing, but just as you were talking about, this kind of came into my head, and I was like, oh, this kind of makes sense. A lot of Georgia Tech students are not from the Southeast.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
Yep.
if you grew up in the Southeast, you grew up going with your neighborhood buddies, you're going with the dads in the neighborhood to college football games, or going to or tailgating on the weekends, or just having that atmosphere and that love for the sport and that love for the school and that love for the team. I think Georgia Tech has so many students that come in from outside the Southeast or even from other countries that are that don't have that instilled in them as far as the passion for the sports and the passion for the following your team and supporting your team. So I think what you get on the back end is when these students graduate and they move on, sports isn't that important necessarily to those to all of them. I'm not saying all of them, and I'm not saying it's not. Yeah. I'm not putting everybody in any kind of different bucket or whatever. But I'm just saying that, like, I think a lot of those students are not big, huge sports fans because they didn't grow up with it.
Yeah.
So on the back end, you're not going to get as much support when it comes to, hey, let's support the athletics, buy season tickets, donate to the funds. I just don't think you're going to get that as much because it's just not important to so many of those students. Yeah. That being all said, Georgia Tech has got great facilities. They do have a good following. They do have a good right here in the heart of the city. I mean, all their programs are just struggling right now. They just really are. And I would love to see it turn around because Georgia Tech's a vital part of the ACC and always has been. Yeah. I mean, the glory days of Bobby Cremins and Stephon Marbury and those guys. I mean, that was so great to have them as a powerhouse in the conference.
Yeah, it really was. And you got 6.5 million people there, and the largest college sports market in America. There's no city that big that's that college-based, college-oriented. Take a quick break. Be right back with Tommy Kane in Atlanta.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
I was talking to my wife during the break, talking about Georgia Tech, and because she lived in Atlanta for 10 years, and you think about it is a very hard school, and you have a lot of foreign students there. But then I compare that to like Auburn, all the foreign students at Auburn. There's a lot of them, and they get totally immersed into everything. I think because of the Kia plant there in West Point, Georgia, 10 to 15% of the school system in Auburn are Koreans, and they absolutely are immersed in Auburn. And I think Georgia Tech, just go ask these people, say, hey, be part of the Georgia Tech family. Because I don't know how many of them are going to stay behind if they're foreign students, but here's another one. Look at Alabama, majority out of state. Okay, over 40,000 students. But you've got to make those people feel like they're part of something. And I guess if you're an athletic director, you say to people, there's two kinds of people that, we have out here. We have investors and we have takers. Y'all all need to be investors in the program. I want to flip to NC State, your school. I was talking about it. When you watch on TV and you look at the football stadium, Carter Finley Stadium is a really nice stadium.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful stadium. And NC State people, that's majority in state. I would say 55, 60%, correct?
I would say that's definitely about right. Yeah.
Okay. See, and that's now Duke is what percent in state versus from New Jersey, New York, and the Northeast. That there's a big difference in those two schools. Dave Doran is coming up on his 10th year at NC State.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at basketball and everything like, hell, you got 2 national championships. If you put North Carolina State in the ACC, okay, you would have, okay, obviously Kentucky's won 8 national championships. Florida's won 2 and Arkansas's won 1. So they would be right there behind Kentucky. Yet in the ACC, they have to share it with, of course, North Carolina and with Duke.
Right.
I mean, I think NC State sometimes, I don't think people, if you pulled that school separate, they're good in most everything. You look at every sport, football, basketball, baseball. What is their fundraising like? Have you ever helped them with that? I'm saying this because the ACCs, I know in the SEC, these populist, Tigers Unlimited, Tide Pride, the Gridiron Society at Georgia, what do they call it at North Carolina State?
It's the Wolfpack Club. I mean, it's just it's there's our fundraising thing for the boosters, and I think what the problem that one of the things NC State, we have some great facilities. I mean, we play basketball in one of the nicest arenas, and it's a professional arena. It's where the Carolina Hurricanes play, right? It's RBC Arena, and it's just beautiful. It's a fantastic building. I'm biased. I always liked the Reynolds Coliseum days when I was there, and as a manager and then as a player. I mean, that place was just unbelievably loud and such a great atmosphere for college basketball. I mean, fans are right on top of the court. But the times changed, and we had to move on to bigger and better things make it sexier for recruiting and whatnot. And we have this arena now. But the NC State fan base is phenomenal. First of all, they're diehards, but they're so hungry. They are so hungry for success on a really good level. Like they're chomping at the bit for an ACC championship basketball team. Has been since the late '80s, since we've had a regular season champion and tournament champion. I mean, it's just they are hungry, but they show up and they're passionate. And as far as fundraising goes, I mean, it's like any school anywhere in the country, but especially one that hasn't had a lot of national success year after year after year. It kind of comes and goes, right? When we're doing really well, our football program is doing well. We're 10 games, 10 win seasons, stuff like that. I know the numbers go up with the giving because people like when they win. This is simple, right? It's simple math. And then you have the off years and stuff like that, and it kind of goes up and down. Whereas I think when you have the big schools like the Alabamas or whatever that just sustain excellence, right, for so long that the money just keeps pouring in. I mean, people just want to be part of it, want to be involved with it. But NC State's got some great facilities. They've got a lot of people in the right place, I think. And it's just people don't understand, like to see what Clemson and Alabama and Georgia now have done over the past couple of years in football is astronomical. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like to repeat and to have that kind of sustained excellence in football. So the key to it is to get to that point and then sustain it and just keep those recruits coming in and keep that buzz going and keep that level of momentum going. And for the schools like NC State that have one pretty good year and maybe get to a good bowl game, but don't really have a shot at the national championship, you can kind of build off of that, but you can't get the top echelon guys. You got to get that 1 year when you come in and have get to the Finals Four or in basketball, get to the Final Four and really get a national following and get these people so fired up that the recruiting becomes easier and the transfer portal and everything else sees you as a destination sexy school to go play for. And I think that's just the hardest thing for the NC States of the world that just have great years and then have pretty mediocre years. Good years, pretty mediocre years. The up and down just makes it really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking when you compare ACC to the Big Ten, they've got Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. You've got, in terms of football, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, and NC State. They could be that school kind of like, well, I wouldn't say they're like Texas A&M. NC State's one more consistently, I would say, but you've got some schools in there. I'm not sure. That's where I'm going with this is, are they asking for the business? On every sales call you ever make, whether it's on the phone or in person, how many times, if you look back, did you miss an opportunity to ask for the business? I doubt with you any, but I'm saying people will do that. And I just think if I'm the ACC commissioner, I get everybody together and say, all right, look, are we going to continue to watch everybody else, remodel their houses and buy lake houses and new cars and new clothes and us sit here and go, oh no, what are we going to do?
Right.
I'm being serious. I don't know, but I would love it if you could bring on someone that you know from NC State on this show and ask them, because to me, again, I'm an SEC, I'm an Auburn grad, but we better be careful. I say this a lot. We don't want to have just a handful of good programs and a bunch of other programs that are just gasping for air, Tommy. That's
I agree with you. I agree with you. I mean, but it's hard. Like I said, Rob, I think it's just hard to sustain that level of prominence in the country right now with everything that's going on. I mean, the Wake Forests and the Vanderbilts of the world and the private schools that are in the conference, and the Miami, it's a private school. Most people forget the University of Miami is a private school with an enrollment of less than 8,000. I mean, there's those schools. I mean, it's hard for those schools to maintain and keep up with the Clemsons and the Florida States of the world. It just is. I mean, you're never gonna. I don't think in our lifetime we'll ever see Vanderbilt football ever win an SEC championship. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So at least I would think. I mean, it might, but I doubt it. And so, I don't think
anything can happen.
Anything can happen, right? You get 11 athletes on the field,
but it's not likely.
Yeah, it's unlikely, right?
I
mean, they got a lot better chance of winning the NCAA tournament in basketball than they do in football. Good thing. But my point being is that, so those schools need the success of the other schools for them to survive. They got to split the pot up. That's what they got to do,
Yeah. That's why we'll get you back on. I know you've got a tight schedule this morning, but I love this discussion. And if you can get some people on when you're on with us for the roundtable, we'd love to do it, because I think you've got the connections to make it happen. But right there in Atlanta, where you are, that's SEC and ACC. There's nothing like it. And there's no major city in America like Atlanta. But tell people how they can follow you and about your production company.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Always love being on with you guys. It's great to talk, especially on a Tuesday morning. You can follow me on Instagram at Tommy Kane, KANE_talent. And then follow all my stuff on there. And then my acting work and whatnot, my hosting work is at TommyKane _talent or -talent.com. And then pack30productions.com is my production company that do video production, Emmy award-winning stuff. So anybody out there ever needs anything, just look me up.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to doing it. Go Wolfpack. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, Rob.
All right. Thank you. That is Tommy Kane over in Atlanta. Doug Dean's going to join us in just a second, the AU Dose down in Birmingham. And I'm looking around the country right now, the Pac-12, if they don't do something, I'm going to have to say it. The respirator's on, the priest is in the room, and they're calling the kinfolk to the bedside. Now, we're here in San Diego. State may join the Pac-12. I don't know who else, but what about Arizona State and Arizona jumping ship to the Big 12? You think that ain't going to happen? And here's another question. With all the money that Phil Knight, the CEO, the founder of Nike, has at his disposal, he has not been able to buy Oregon's way into the Big Ten. And a lot of people think the next two shoes to drop are going to be Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten. It's a possibility. Hell, anything's possible. It's usually when you're let your guard down that this big news explodes. I had news yesterday about Florida State. Hell, we talk about it all the time on this show. Tomorrow, we're going to have Mr. College Football, Tony Barnhart, on the show. He's batting in the leadoff position in the first segment. 2.5 weeks ago, he talked about possible rules changes in college football. And I think, not stopping the clock on incomplete passes, if that speeds it up, will that mean more commercials? Apparently not. But we do know this. Because of reviews, in the last 4 years, college football games have increased by about 7 minutes. To last year, the average game time was 3 hours and 21 minutes. That's a long time. And when you look at people that are going to the games, just remember, got to make that a pleasurable experience. But the reviews, we love the reviews because they can correct a mistake, but they overdo it. But I will say this, last year, what's really funny to me is the average game time went up to 3 hours and 21 minutes. But I saw fewer targeting calls than in any season that I can remember. So it looks to me like the message is getting out to tackle right and not target. I mean, football's always going to be a physical, violent game. That's why the average career of a player in the NFL is about 4 years. Again, you're going to be 25, 26, and you got to walk away from that. But if you do the 4 years, or maybe it's 5, you get the pension. That might be the key, is you get that NFL pension, which is a great pension, because about 90% of the pensions that were available to American workers 30 years ago don't exist anymore. So you got to create your own pension. You got to do something. But I'm going to be watching that one and seeing what happens on these rules changes. All for TV, yeah. But when we go to this from 4 to 12 team college football playoff, you're going to see the interest in college football skyrocket. It's already high. The game's as good as it's ever been. Now, people will talk about, well, it's all about offenses and there's no defenses. No, there's good defense. There's some good defenses, but you've got to be able to score a lot of points. Go back to Alabama 6 years ago, what they were averaging, in the low 30s. Now it's mid to upper 40s per game. They increased by a couple of touchdowns when they brought in guys like Tua. And then Mac Jones just rolled after that. Jalen Hurts before that. Bryce Young. I mean, you could argue Bryce Young is the greatest Alabama football player to never win a national championship. A lot of people will say that. He won the Heisman, but they didn't win the national championship. Alabama won it in 2020 in the year of the virus, and they just crushed people with a 10-game SEC schedule. And by an act of Congress, Ohio State somehow, playing 4 games or whatever it was, got into the national championship. But like the student who doesn't show up for class except on the first day or week when the syllabus is handed out, doesn't come in between and shows up for the final exam and gets a 23 on the final. That's an F, in case you're wondering. That's what happened to Ohio State. They were not ready, and Alabama boat raced them out of Western civilization. That's how this stuff works. But we're going to see college football and the NIL and all this stuff. It's going to work itself out. I'm going to say it every day. It's going to be just like the Olympics. You watch. All you people out there that think all these college athletes are all getting big checks are out of your mind. How many of y'all have actually looked at the numbers or asked around? Go to a city like Atlanta. You'd think you'd see billboards everywhere for players from Georgia and Georgia Tech. You don't. You don't see them. Go to Memphis. You don't see them. I've heard one Memphis basketball player who does something for, maybe it's a credit union or something like that. It's just not there. People, use your heads and think about in your business. How many people call you up and go, come over here, I want to throw a bunch of money at you? That just doesn't happen. So all you people out there that are waiting for the other shoe to drop, college football's ruined, college sports are ruined. You're wrong. Because too many of you the last 3 years have been sitting on your butts, feeling sorry for yourselves, locking the doors, being scared, and watching TV and being told what to think and how to think and when to think it. God help you. College sports are going to be fine. I mean, we're going through some reshuffling of the chairs, but quit buying into the negative herd mentality. I mean, you think about how your business runs, how any business runs. Initially, remember, when the government is throwing money at something and the private sector doesn't want anything to do with it, that's the free market. Okay? So college football, college sports are going to be great. The portal, when they start publishing the numbers, because we've now got 4 seasons of data, 2019, 2020, 21, 22. 4 seasons of data to look at since the portal came out right after this.
Hey y'all, it's Ainsley from Hewlett & Dunn, just coming to let you know about our new collection of boots. It's going to be our dress boots. They're the horsepower collection, and they're genuine exotic leathers and really comfortable. Comes in all different sizes and patterns, so come check them out.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne back with Doug Dean in Birmingham, AU Dose. But I want to say this, and my wife, Mildred, said something to me. She said, "Oh, you need to know this." I'm not talking about, our listeners are educated, informed, and the best out there. But a lot of people have bought into the narrative that it's okay to feel sorry for yourself, give up. College sports are ruined because a bunch of 17-year-olds are trying to tell you how to write a narrative. That's not going to be the case. You watch the free market. We've been there before. Substitutions in the late 60s. Oh, football's ruined. We cut to 85 scholarships in the early 80s. Football's ruined. How many times have we heard this? Folks, if Meet the Press had been around at the time the light bulb was invented, their lead story would have been lamenting the death of the candle. Look at how many candle makers are out there in business now selling scented candles and colored candles and big candles and tall candles and small candles. The free market, folks, always believe in that. That's what drives everything. We, the people, that's what Sidelines is all about. So I'm excited about what Doug Dean's going to tell us. I know he's been doing some research of his own down there in Birmingham. And Doug, you saw that report yesterday. Tommy Kane and I were talking right before you came on from Atlanta on our ACC report. Florida State, we want to look at, I think they're trying to wake up their alumni base about you better start investing in this program. And number 2, to the ACC, we need to renegotiate that grant of rights contract that has us held hostage with very little money compared to the Big Ten and the SEC at all through 2036. So I know you have your comments on all this stuff, and spring practice started yesterday for the Lee County Institute. So let's talk.
Your Honor, the Honorable Rob Browne, if it please the court, can we not discuss the matters of criminal law on this show?
Oh, not at all today.
Thank you, because I don't want to be found. Yeah, I'm not going there. So I'll tell you this. That it always seems like months and months when college football ends in early January. It seems like months, and you wake up one day, it's a little warmer outside. Somebody texts you a picture of water moccasins sunning themselves, so winter's almost over. And lo and behold, Coach Hugh Freeze kicks off his inaugural spring ball at Auburn. I bet you Hugh had to be roaming the field. Reports were that he let the quarterbacks, Philip Montgomery and Ken Austin, handle the quarterbacks, and he was jumping around to observe all the players. So I like that. I like that he's sort of morphing into a CEO role and watching the big picture. But gosh, we could go so many different directions, Rob, and it's not lost on me that we've still got some teams in the SEC, Auburn being one of them, fighting tooth and nail against some long odds to see if they can win a game and make it in the big show. So I want to focus on and get your reaction. An interesting, what I consider a little bit of a dilemma for Hugh Freeze, and this may be true of any head football coach in the SEC who is in his first year. I think that Hugh's going to have to look at the schedule and decide, am I going to deploy, and I especially mean offensively, Roberts will bring havoc, his favorite word, on the defensive side of the ball. In fact, you need to have, Rob, if you can, if not Ron Roberts, maybe a disciple of his from that defensive tree, and just talk about this concept that they actually measure metrics around when is havoc being created. But we'll come back to that later. But offensively, do you want to deploy with our strengths, Hugh Freeze, to win as many games as we can? Or do you want to have year one of installing the system that you're going to run with as we build the roster back? And I think the answer is both, not either or, Rob, but both and. And let me explain what I mean, and you can react. I think what he will do is we're going to, he'll know more by the end of spring. Can Ashford or Garrett or one of these guys? I've written off TJ myself, but kids can have a way of fooling you. I just have seen all the body of work I need to on TJ.
Yeah.
So I think he'll look at the schedule and say, all right, the following 6 or 7 games look very winnable. We'll be favored in those games. And I want to get my system installed done on those games and run what we like to run. And of course, the game plan will look at matchups and deploy accordingly. Some games call for more grinding it, leaning on your run game, leaning on your quarterback running the ball. Other games, maybe they'll want to lead with going to the air to these big wide receivers. We've got Mardner and Ronaldo
Browne.
And Camden Browne, they're 6'6", 6'5", 6'3". That's a big advantage for these quarterbacks on 50-50 balls, or just being a mismatch problem for them out in patterns. So I think what he'll do when you look at the games that are less winnable, obviously Georgia, Alabama, that will be almost certainly be double-digit underdogs even at home. He will abandon that, here's my system, and he'll look at, can we shorten this game? Can we lean on our stable of running backs and tight ends and just see if we can keep the game close going into the fourth quarter, get some points off special teams? So I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. But I'm fascinated to see because we really do have a great running back room, especially when the new kid, Jeremiah Cobb, arrives on campus. He's a bona fide receiver coming out in patterns, not just a running back. And I think we're going to have – it's all about, can we at least be slightly above average on this offensive line?
Well, you're right. And your AU dose yesterday was – you nailed it. You talked about the key positions with Auburn. You talked about the quarterback room, okay? If you would elaborate on the guys maybe that – here's one I want you to talk about, Holden Geriner. You talked about his big, strong arm, what he did. Of course, he won Benedictine, Academy over in Savannah, the state championship against Columbus Carver. He came in one game last year. I don't know if he ended up being a red shirt for the year, what that cost him or whatever, but he's a big, strong guy that can help you. But the one that intrigues me beyond him is Robbie Ashford. You think about the mechanics. Remember we heard that about Jalen Hurts. Can Hugh Freeze and Philip Montgomery and Kent Austin, who was I remember I saw Kent Austin play in high school, Brentwood Academy, with his tight end, Jimmy Hockaday, and they beat MUS in the playoffs in 1980, 35-7 at Hull Dobbs Stadium in Memphis. They've got some. Auburn has never had quarterback coaches like what they have now. Talk about that.
Yeah, great question. And, it needs to be prefaced, Rob, with a reality that I don't care who you're a fan of, the defending champ, Georgia Bulldogs, Alabama's owes no one an apology for their resume lately, although I'm sure their fans are frustrated that they've had to, share the stage with Georgia the last couple of years. But Georgia dodged Alabama last year through a series of, thanks to Tennessee and LSU. But is there anything less reliable than spring ball, the word that comes out of spring ball? And by that, I mean, in 2010, really, certainly spring, but absolutely fall camp. Well, I'd say less fall, but more spring. In 2010, based on the body of work and what they observed, Gene Chizik and Malzahn would not have started eventual Heisman Cam Newton. You remember that?
Yes.
I mean,
they didn't know what he could do.
So what's got to be what's exciting forgive the ambient telephone noise in the background. What will be exciting for Auburn fans, really any college football freaks out there to watch. There's what's the line from Cool Hand Luke, Rob? Sometimes a nothing hand can be a great hand. Well, Hugh Freeze arrives on campus, and based on the play you saw last year with Robbie Ashford looking really bumpy and messy and having a real problem with a hot-headed temperament that, if you talk to people that knew him at Hoover, that comes as no surprise. But he had flashes of just athletic brilliance. Meanwhile, you've got Holden Gariner, who was really winning a lot of those 11-on-11 camps heading into coming to Auburn. They really believed he's got a major upside, but he got thrown into the fire foolishly by Harsin and looked really bad. It probably didn't help his confidence. So Hugh Freeze wants to go in the portal and get a plug-and-play guy. That doesn't work out for reasons we know about. He may go back into the portal May 1 after spring ball. But what if playing this nothing hand at QB, he's forced, his quarterback brain trust, they're forced to develop and work with both mentally and in terms of the QB position with these I'm going to say two quarterbacks, Gariner and Ashford, and one of them emerges. My bet would be Ashford, because if it's a close call, then the tiebreaker is going to be those wheels that he's got.
Yeah. Well, he had 709 yards rushing last year, as you pointed out in yesterday's AU Dose. Well, I got to say this. I think, now my childhood hero is Pat Sullivan, but as an athlete, Cam Newton was impressive.
Oh,
the greatest
Damian
athlete.
Craig.
Yeah. But the greatest athlete to ever play quarterback to this point ever was a kid out of Pineville, Georgia, Nick Marshall. Okay. That's how good of an athlete he is. Robbie Ashford, with the right coaching, if they can work on his mechanics, he could be the greatest athlete to ever play quarterback at Auburn. I have not seen a guy that fast with those kinds of tools, and you can always look. It's like you can always control that enthusiasm and that intensity and everything like that. But if you don't have it, you don't have it.
Your Honor, I strenuously object to your hyperbole.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I love that from the line.
Yeah.
Whatever the move. What was the move? A few good men. I strenuously object. No, hyperbole is allowed. We get to be football fans in spring and fall camp before we all come crashing back down to earth when the unexpected happens in a tough loss. But no question about it. Ashford has, what I think, and Jason Caldwell's done a nice job of reminding your listeners, your viewers of this. Robbie Ashford played his first actual college ball last year. He never saw the field at Oregon, and they probably was not even back up there. But you bring him in here, and now that he gets real coaching, I don't think he had any of that last year, to be candid. Sorry for the Harsin hate, but the data speaks for itself. But if he gets calmed down by Hugh Freeze mentally, he gets held to more accountability about keeping your cool, never getting too up after a big play or too down after a bad play. Yeah. And then they work on his footwork. You got 3 guys down there that know how to get the best Ashford can possibly deliver. Yeah. Then, wow, you start asking yourself, what if? Because early season, Rob, they'll be able to lean on our running game and those big tight ends. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm so excited. Yesterday, and credit the great Justin Ferguson for catching this. But Nick Mardner, who's a 6'6" guy, we're going to have our first ever Canadian on the Auburn Tigers football team, Rob. Mardner, who's a Cincinnati transfer, went up and caught a ball at the pylon. Likewise, Ronaldo Fairweather, memorize that name. You're going to be hearing him making 50-50 plays going. He caught a 25-yard pass that he had to go. It looked like it was overthrown by Ashford. He goes up and pulls it down and high pointing it. So, and then, like you said, you had Camden Browne and those big tight ends. Mm-hmm. We can play big boy ball, Rob, and still have a passing threat with 3, even 4 big, tall receivers going out in routes.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying about the first. My mind is just racing, trying to think. And I think about the backup quarterback from Pat Sullivan, Dieter Brock, went to Jacksonville State, then played in the CFL for a long time, but he wasn't Canadian. He was born in Alabama. Now, here's the thing. I like about quarterback. I'm not saying Robbie.
Hold on, Rob. Wasn't Jesse Palmer Canadian?
Yes, he was Canadian.
Yeah, so we've had them in the SEC. Alabama had a Canadian player.
Oh yeah, they did. And so you think about this. I'm not saying Robbie Ashford would be the greatest quarterback to ever play, but he could be the greatest athlete. Yeah, and if you can harness that with Philip Montgomery, Kent Austin, ask Philip Lally about Kent Austin, how good a coach he is, how good a quarterback. Auburn has now. It's like having Paul Tudor Jones, hedge fund manager up in Connecticut, from Memphis, went to my school, went to PDS. Of course, he went to MUS, not Christian Brothers. Great, very smart man. Like having him as your financial advisor. You are talking, I don't think Auburn people have seen this, how important this is. So big story. Now, you also did a brilliant job of laying out the case for Auburn's offensive line with the transfers, Killian Zaire, Coffee, Austin Troxell, who was there for 11 years. God love him. One of the, I'd hire that guy right now, sight unseen, because he can take anything. But the offensive line, for the first time in 5 or 6 years, I think there's some optimism about what Auburn has.
Well, Freeze has talked about, man, this is uncharted territory for me. Coach Freeze said, having to go out there and get, was it 9, 10, 11?
Yeah, 9.
O-linemen. I was just shocked. I know Jason Caldwell was, that there was even a supply that large of that many. And talk about no margin for error. When they went after recruits, they had to get the deal done and close. That they've got those. And so you look at it, you figure this spring they're going to be able to say, all right, this one we were optimistic about this guy. He's just not showing promise, or he's not tough enough. And they go through that culling process, and we get to August, July, August, they're going to know which 5 they're going to really work on. Yeah. Then you get, I think what they'll do, there are 2, if you were paying attention, they've got several guys that are Swiss Army knives on the O-line that can play multiple positions. So then they'll work with 2 more utility players for depth, and they just continue to build depth during the year. I'm being rosy on that. I think realistically, we just want to get to average SEC line. And if anything we do to find strengths on the left or right side, running the ball or pass pro is gravy. But we were well below average. You agree, a year ago, Rob?
Yeah, no question about it. And Dana Marquez, Auburn's director of equipment operations, is going to be on the show here in about 8 or 9 minutes. Hang on if you can. We're going to talk with him about a lot of stuff in college athletics, not just at Auburn, but all over the place, what's being done. But you're right. Doug Dean, AU Dose, has more right after this.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne back with you. Doug Dean, AU Dose, and also Dana Marquez just checking in from the athletic complex. I'm not sure if he's in the Woltholtz football performance facility or not. Auburn's director of equipment operations. Let me just put that in perspective, what he does, Doug. I think you would agree. That's like being the chief surgeon or director of surgery at the Mayo Clinic or something, what he does. And I mean, he has changed so much of what goes on. I say behind the scenes, but 21 sports with 35, maybe 40 managers, but we're going to get into it here with Dana in just a second. But Doug, you were making some points about what Auburn's bringing in with Hugh Freeze and offensive lineman, quarterback, and everything like that, and keep going. And I know you probably got a question or two for Dana, and hang on with us if you can, but this is great stuff for all of football and sports.
Well, and, Dana can comment on, I'm sure he gets intel. Some of it he's probably sworn to secrecy on about the development of these incoming players and the players coming in back from last year. That's what's really remarkable. And I think if we're fair as Auburn fans, we should allow for a few speed bumps early season. They find out on the fly who's ready for battle in the SEC and who they have to rotate out, and the culling process. That this roster flip, Rob, is approaching, am I right, 50%, maybe more of this roster when the dust settles. That's not ideal, but if you watch, if you have 2 seasons back to back that get your head coach fired, then you probably are glad to see a roster flip. Nothing unkind meant to guys that fought, gave their best, and and to be fair, the 2021 Iron Bowl, Auburn should have won over the mighty Crimson Tide. So that's how the margin of error is just tight in the SEC until you can build a dominant roster like you've seen Georgia do, and especially in the trenches last couple of years, and Alabama's certainly right on their heels. But let me, before you flip to Dana, I've forgotten the scene in that movie with Dana Carvey and Mike Myers when we are not worthy, Dana. This man is the GOAT of high-tech innovation in especially football, I'm sure all sports. And he's an underappreciated asset for the Auburn Tigers. So I'm glad to share the screen with you, Mr. Marquez.
Doug, thank you very much, man. Very humbled to even be here. So thank you so much.
Well, love it. I'm Doug and I both, but he and I were talking about the changes at Auburn, and just for everybody listening, what have you noticed the most? And are you still in the athletic complex, or have they moved you over to the new football performance facility, the Woltholtz performance football facility?
So, right. The biggest difference is that we have a new director of football equipment, right? So Tyler Renard, who joined my staff last year, a younger gentleman who spent some time at the University of Arkansas, was a student there, was an assistant there, and then oversaw UTSA's equipment staff for the last 3 years and joined us last year. So we got to spend a good year together to hand over the reins to day-to-day operations of football to Tyler. And to answer the second question, yes, we have moved over to the new football facility, the Waltos Football Performance Center, is phenomenal. It is a gigantic building with every resource you could possibly known to man that you need to perform at a high level. For me, it's been different because I've really kind of taken part back to my 2008, 2009 management style, where I'm now overseeing everything again. And so I'm in 3 different buildings of the athletic department. So I'm still in the athletic complex. I'm over at the Waltos Football Center. And right now I'm helping out Leroy Burrell and Karen Hop over at the soccer building, just getting that thing situated, with Leroy being a brand new coach as well.
Wow. You go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It should almost be, especially if there's any segment of Auburn people, or really just SEC fans, period, in the listening audience, anytime Dana Marquez comes on, should be mandatory question, which I'll ask now. But Dana, if you had a pulse on November 30th, my birthday, by the way, and Bo Jackson's 2013, then you had eyeballs on the most iconic game, especially walk-off finish to a game in the history, not of football, but of all sports. I stand by that. And the most surreal moment in that game was to see Dana Marquez with a damn sewing machine on the sidelines. Coaches love to talk about everybody doing their job, and I think they probably don't have in mind the guy that's refilling the Gatorade buckets, but that matters too. And there you were fighting your rear end off to get Ladarius Owens, was it, eligible with his jersey to get back in the game. Take us inside how in the world that happened in the first place.
Yeah, so I guess I'm known for that more than anything else. I always tell people that happened in 2013, but I also won the Maxwell Award for innovation in innovation in safety in 2015,
which is more meaningful.
Which is definitely my career, but no, it was really kind of a good situation for us. I mean, one, shows you that you have to be prepared for almost any situation, right? Everybody thinks we weren't really prepared for that event. Ladarius Owens was a senior that year, and it was his last game at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And we asked him when he came off the field, his jersey was ripped pretty much in half. And we said, hey, look, we're just going to rip this off. We're going to, give you your backup jersey. We'll just pull that over and we're good to go. Well, he asked, Dana, this is my last game. I've had this jersey all year. I'd like to finish it in this jersey. I'm like, well, we can do that. So we had the sewing machine on the sideline. We just ripped his jersey off. We had some time. We had about 25 to 30 seconds to put it all together. And, sewing is actually, it's a lot easier than it looks, to be truthfully honest with you. But the team and the staff that I have at that time was Dale Calloway, Brad Rapaz, Hunter Smithwick, and that group. They were phenomenal. They had everything where they needed to have it. And my job was just to sew it back together. And Ladarius never missed a play. He never got in trouble for anything or anything like that. And I think we got called out because we didn't have enough money to buy a backup jersey. I go, but that's really not the case. So it was really more the request of the athlete. And, we live off three real pillars here in the equipment room: service our student athlete, educate them what we can and cannot do from an equipment-based standpoint, and innovate. So that's kind of how it worked out.
Dana, and I'll pitch back to Robin. I got to get out of y'all's way in a second, but the only thing that would have made it more epic, you know where I'm going, Rob, is if you were frantically, during the 1 second timeout, you were frantically stitching up the jersey of Chris Davis to get him back in the game. And then everybody our rival would be saying, what if they couldn't get the jersey sewn?
I think we would have still made it, so we've been in good shape.
Hey, one interesting thing on that, my two boys, Wilson and Max, were in section 42 at that game. And when everybody came down on the field, of course, Wilson high-fived Ladarius Owens. And when he did, Ladarius gave him his Under Armour glove. And we still have that kept safely put in a mayonnaise jar, hermetically sealed. But it is, and it was That was a cool. He also took a selfie with Sammy Coates after the game. But Doug, I love that question because you remember Vern Lundquist was on the show back in the fall, and he said we brought that up with him. He said, "Yeah, it was unbelievable talking about the sewing machine." But Doug, if you have not ever had the tour to see what they do there,
oh yeah,
it is like going aboard an aircraft carrier below deck. It's just amazing. And Dana, along the lines of what Doug said, you're talking about service, education, and also just, what you can and can't do, but safety. We talk so much about concussion protocol and all. My brother played college football for Virginia Tech, and he's been through the effects of that, but he played in the mid 70s. It's a different world now. For parents that are listening, and we've got a lot of listeners all over, what do you tell them now about the quality and what's going on? Because I remember February 11th of 2017 meeting with you. At that time, you were doing a $1,750 per helmet retrofit. I can't imagine what it's like now, but for the future, and we talked about coachsafely.org. Kevin Skarbinski was on Saturday. He really sung your praises, but kind of give a message out there and what you're doing to all those parents who may be saying, should I let my son play football or not?
No, absolutely. I think safety is the pinnacle of what we do, right? I think how you go about doing that from a parent-based standpoint or from a high school-based standpoint, obviously they don't have the funds that an SEC Division I equipment room has, more or less an NFL equipment room. So, but you have to understand, all those kids are wanting to emulate the student athlete at our level or in the NFL. And, we do have some tools that most high schools, if about 90% of them do not have, and definitely don't have it at the youth leagues. Right. So, right now, the biggest transformation for us is every helmet that we're wearing on our field right now is 3D map or digitally imaged to that head. So it's custom fit to that student athlete. And that, we've obviously been doing that for a while, but the manufacturers have really jumped on board with Visus, Schutt, Light Helmets, Rydell. All those guys have really kind of come full circle with trying to get the most customized fit for every athlete. And, the one thing that you talked about, Coach Safely. So, I helped write their educational based tools through a company that I own, helmetfitting.com. And helmetfitting.com is an educational based tool for parents and coaches where they can actually go in. It's the only website out there in the country that has taken all the leading manufacturers and taken all their information and put it on one site. So you can go in and look at video content, take a certification test, all these things to help your student athlete learn how to buy a helmet correctly. I think that's the forefront of what I always talk about, education, right? You're always going to get these companies that are the fad, right? Like if you saw last year, I think the big one was the NFL went to Guardian Cap and started putting these foam helmets on top of helmet manufacturers. And I'm like, hey, I get it. It's a marketing tool. Will it reduce some impact? Sure. But if you fit the helmet correctly and using manufacturer guidelines, that will do the exact same thing. So understand what you're doing, how you're going about doing it is probably the key to the safety portion of what we do. And it will help parents and definitely ease their mind if they understand how the helmet and how everything works together. I think that's kind of the key part of why we brought helmetfitting.com, and it's still kind of one of the things that I talk about on a yearly basis of safety, education, and follow the rules the way they're meant to be followed. So yeah.
Doug, I know you may have another question as long as you're with us before you have to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna put one to you, and I'll as they like to say on these shows, I'll hang up and listen, Rob.
Thank you, Coach.
But Dana, is there, let's say the last 5 years, and I meant what I said, that Dana's the GOAT in modern era football of equipment and safety innovations. And I'm sure Dana would hasten to say There are others, there are engineers and people in the industry that deserve credit too. But Auburn is very fortunate to have someone as brilliant supporting that part of the game. My question, sticking to football, is there a particular equipment that has, in your mind, can be given direct credit for the reduction of injuries in the last 5 or so years? Anything come to mind, Dana?
Yeah, I really do. I think if you take a look and the monitoring process of helmet manufacturers, I think they've really kind of stepped up their game. I think the big thing behind helmet, technology that has been the big shift is they're not relying on air anymore, right? Thing with air-filled helmet, there isn't like a top-notch 5-star helmet, whatever they're calling 5-star these days. None of our helmets have air in them. And even the ones that I fit back 5-10 years ago that did have air, we never fit them with air. We wanted to make sure that we followed the guidelines, and if those helmets didn't fit with air, we were in good shape. So I think those are the biggest components. The technology, foam development technology, is out of the roof right now. So you take a look at NASCAR, IndyCar, F1 racing, a lot of this cross breeding of technology, of using automobile technology and those types of scenarios, it's a huge piece. You're now starting to see it in shoulder pad development, things like that. I mean, even stuff that we do here at Auburn. So we are one school, probably the only school in this country right now that actually can scan an athlete and actually 3D print right there in our equipment room. So we the new innovation lab that we put in the Waltos football facility was basically meant to help perform at the best level and mapping that student athlete and then creating the modalities and the foam developments that will help them down the road.
Well, and next question I have is, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Michael Zabala, Auburn College of Engineering, correct?
Yes.
That is unbelievable. I know we're about to go to a break, but I think if people had an idea of, you mentioned 3D imaging, how important that is, but in the first quarter, you can be injured in a game anywhere in the country, and they can call in an airstrike to their headquarters. Is that headquarters now in the Waltos Football Performance Center? Where is it?
Yeah, no, it's actually in the equipment room. So the equipment room is a massive facility in the new football. And so that new 3D printer, the 3D imaging system, is actually all in the equipment room. And we called it the Innovation Lab for a reason. We're going to continue to grow that process with motion capturing technology, performance technology, things like that. So it's coming in-house.
All right, when we come back from the break, I'm going to play some scenarios about what's happening in real time, because I think this is so far out beyond the tip of the spear that I want to break it down. And so I'm going to make up a case of something happening and see, let you paint that picture for people and put it in the vernacular, because it's changing. And I know so many people have asked me, they're going, is that real? So you're going to explain it as only you can right after this. More with Dana Marquez, Rob Browne, right after this.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Dana Marquez, Auburn Director of Equipment Operations, is with us here on Sidelines. And Dana, we've had Dr. Zabala, Michael Zabala, on the program a few times before, but what blew my mind, and I've had more people ask me about that particular interview we had with him on Sidelines the first time 2 years ago. You could have a player in a game, Penn State versus Ohio State in the Happy Valley. In the first quarter, a player goes down with a wrist injury or a shoulder injury. They call in to the sports performance center there. Do they have an account set up? How does that process work, and how quickly can a response be made, provided they have the 3D imaging and all on the other end?
Well, it can be done pretty quickly. I think it's not instantaneous by any stretch of the imagination. I think for us, let's say someone gets hurt and they need a cast built. I still think you're relying on the sports athletic training staff to wrap that and get that done. I think for us to do 3D printing and digital imaging of that piece that has to be custom made for that athlete, we can. Great example. We can make an insole within 5 hours, right? Instead of 3 weeks to a month. If you need something as simple as a thumb brace, that's going to take, about an hour to 3D print it. But it's really kind of understanding that process really is it's nice to have available. And Michael's been doing great work here at Auburn University and with the engineering department, has been doing this with our athletic trainers. We've just taken his technology and his thought process to a way bigger level, right?
Yeah.
And that's really kind of the important piece, is not necessarily instant. It's more of a, let's take a look at it from a long-term scenario. If there is something there, we can now actively put a plan together and get that athlete back faster.
So it's also going for the high schools and middle schools. Anybody that reaches out to y'all can work directly with them. That part of it is amazing, because you talk about you have a something that would take 2 or 3 weeks can be done in 5 hours. That's a significant game changer.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the plan, is that, so the company that we use is a company called Falcon Pursuit, and they're actually flying down the lead engineer, Jay White, who is working with the U.S. Olympic ski team right now, but they live up in Beaverton, Oregon, and they're going to be coming down here in about a week or two to start implementing some new design stuff, some new motion capturing projects. But the other thing I've really asked them is, can we make this portable, right? So can we make this an opportunity for, kind of goes back to helmetfitting.com, is can we make this available to the parents and the youth parents and the high school parents, so you can actually step into this Falcon Pursuit machine, get measured, and tell you exactly what type of helmet you need, what size of helmet you need, what size footwear you are, what type of shoulder pads you need, all right there. So we're actually providing the top level of service, education, and innovation to that student athlete. Now, if I can get that to go, and it has to be cost effective, right? Because this mission is not inexpensive by the imagination. So that's really the big drive in the next portion of our meetings, is really how do we bring it to the masses of protecting our student athletes at all levels.
Dana, that is going to be game changer. And Stephen Shaw, coordinator of NCAA officials, is on the show with us a good bit. He's going to be on hopefully next week. I know they're having their big rules committee meeting Thursday, Friday of this week. There are proposals of a number of things. Tony Barnhart has talked about it here 2.5 weeks ago. He'll be back on tomorrow. We're going to hit it again. But all that being said, in 2021, Stephen Shaw said that there was one targeting call every 5.2 games. Bottom line, it's just my opinion from the 40,000 feet above, last year, it looked like there were fewer than that. I can't remember a season in modern memory with fewer targeting calls. You talk about education and emphasis on safety and all, but the guys ain't getting smaller. They're getting bigger. They ain't getting slower. They're getting faster. They're not lifting less weights. They're doing smarter weights, more efficient. Talk about that. Am I right? Or is it just the message has gotten clear in practice and everywhere else? Number one, you can hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. You hurt your team. And the NFL scouts probably don't like a guy with a lot of targeting violations either, but that's a lot to unpack, but let's try to do that.
No, I think you're right. I think, again, it goes back to the educational portion, right? I think the coaching staffs have done a phenomenal job of reteaching and re-emphasizing the proper way of tackling. I think that's one, right? I think the time that we're actually on the field with shoulder pads, helmets, and actually tackling to the ground has definitely shifted, right? So that portion the coaching staffs have realized. I mean, the NFL realized it this year. They said their concussions were down 50%, which, they kind of pointed to the Guardian cap for that reason. But then no one realizes that they reduced impact by 70% during training camp. So obviously you're going to reduce concussion protocol and recussions by just not hitting people. And so you take a look at all those little factors to that, right?
Yeah.
I think the athletes are definitely understanding the rule better. And the educational pieces have been better. All those things matter. And I think the parents that get in there and say, hey, well, this sport is an impact sport and people get hurt. Yeah, that's very much the case. But if done properly and educate those kids correctly, educate them on how to wear their equipment correctly, educate them how to tackle correctly, there's still those risks, but the reality is it's getting better.
Yeah, it is. And I watch the NFL Network a lot. You came from the 49ers in 2005 when Tommy Tuberville brought you to Auburn. One of a lot of things he did right. But it's changed everything, and I think about the collisions. We have a number of NFL players on here with us. Recently, last couple of weeks, you've had Wesley Britt. I had Glenn Rogers, a friend of mine that played for the Packers and the Buccaneers, and had Ben Troop on yesterday, played 5 years in the NFL. They all say the same thing. The NFL is a collision league. The SEC can't be far behind. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
No, you have to understand the average impact on a Saturday for these guys is about 60 miles an hour. So, I mean, that's a lot of force going to one person. So, and getting up from that and doing that multiple times. So it's really understanding what that speed limit is, right?
Yeah.
When I created Carbon Tech shoulder pads way back, I guess now it's been 10 years. That was actually speaking to an engineer and really they didn't understand what I meant by, like, guys, these guys hit really hard in a short period of time. And we actually did the mathematical equation, and it's like here you go. It's average speed is 60 miles an hour on a Saturday. It's right around 70 miles an hour in the NFL. That's a lot of movement. It's a lot of force. And to build equipment to help that athlete, you talked about getting stronger, getting bigger, getting faster. That helps them. Obviously, the equipment that we're providing them also helps them. So, and how do you manage that day in, day out? That's kind of really the method. So,
yeah, it's just incredible the amount of engineering that goes into, Carbon Tech shoulder pads, the helmets, and all. And they talk about putting those foam pads on the helmets, but they reduced contact by 70%. That's what I love about you. It's like you'd be a phenomenal trial lawyer. I think you might be undefeated, but you got to go back and look at the stats, which is what I do. I always go back and look at numbers because you can't lie with them. I mean, but indicators of where we're going from here. I think the game of football, and you see so much football. The product's as good as it's ever been in terms of excitement and all like that. Safety is getting better. A lot of the impact on your body ice baths. I mean, there's so much stuff that's being done now. Dr. Andrews is on with us from time to time. Man, it's just the interaction with the people that you're around has taught you probably that it's all about, making the game better, but putting safety first. And you can do it without diminishing the quality of the product on the field, can't you?
I think you can. I think that the big piece here is the collaboration, right?
Yeah.
With the sports medicine professionals that we have on staff, the sports performance professionals that we have on staff, obviously communicating that with your coaching staff and all working together, right?
Mhm.
That's really been a huge shift. And it doesn't work like that everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I know it doesn't work that way in the high school market because there's not a lot of high school equipment managers out there performing these duties. Mostly they're coaches or, it's the last coach that was hired. Hey, you're responsible for the equipment, right?
Yeah.
So, it's learning that process of, hey, practicing one way one day and doing something different the next, or how that all looks, kind of helps that student athlete. And, the NFL's figuring it out. Obviously colleges is figuring it out. Where is it going to land in the high school market, right?
Yeah.
Those kids are learning how to play the game of football. They need to learn how to tackle correctly. They need to learn how to move around. So they're hitting more than anybody else, any more than probably a college team or an NFL team. So how do we get that education up there? But just not that. How do we get them to understand that the equipment has to fit correctly? You just can't. I mean, I still talk to high schools all around the country, and I still have high school coaches that just buy extra large helmets for everybody on the team and still put air in them in hopes that it will fit. And it's because of budget. It's because that's what they know and those types of things. And that's still out there. So, trying to, again, it goes back to how do we want to make that shift? How do we want to make that change? And can we jump on board? Can the high school organizations jump on board and really kind of, coach safely here in the state of Alabama? They're trying to grow it. Obviously, it grew into Georgia, things like that for the youth market, where people have to take tests and understand the fitting guidelines of what's going forward. But there has to be that continuously. It's not just a one-hit wonder. Oh, this has happened. Football helmets are changing. Shoulder pads are changing yearly. So you got to stay on top of that.
A few more questions before we let you go. My 94-year-old dad watches and listens to every one of these shows, watches every Auburn game. He graduated from Auburn in 54. He says, boy, I don't understand these guys wearing football pants with no pads on the knees. It looks like they're wearing, running shorts almost, or biking shorts. And I said, well, that's because they got to have their legs moving. He goes, what do they get hit in the knees? But what's really going on in these pants with a lot of the receivers and some of the players that look like they're not? There's got to be some padding, but I don't know.
Oh, I mean, there's padding everywhere in those things. It's just, like I said, it goes back to technology, right?
Yeah.
The foam development, like I said earlier in the show, is just so much better. You don't have to wear big and bulky anymore. And the game back probably in your father's days, everything was taught to tackle at the thighs and below. And that's why you wore the knee pads and all that stuff down there. But now the game is taught to go up and numbers and things like that. So, just the technology and the philosophy of the game has changed so drastically that it's not really a pinpoint of injury is at the knee. It's more upward. So that's how.
Yeah, because Dad played, he walked on at Auburn, but was in architecture school and realized I was a much better architect than I was a football player. But leather helmets, he said, if you put leather helmets on them, that'll teach them to tackle right too. But I like the game now is taught to tackle from the waist up. It's totally different. Another one real quick. Hugh Freeze, every coach comes in, they're all different, but you also have visitors that come by. You mentioned some, if you want to say it, I'm not going to say it, but they just come by to see you with the relationships that you have. And anybody that spends about 5 seconds around you understands why people want to come back and see you. You are dedicated, very, very, you're brilliant. You're an innovator. What is Hugh Freeze like compared to other coaches and his staff? And also with the portal guys coming and going, do you have conversations with them ever about, hey, man, stick it out? Let me give you some examples of guys that didn't think they had a chance. They grounded it out. They never quit, and look at them today.
I don't have those conversations with you, Freeze.
I'm talking about with the players.
But yeah, I have those conversations regularly with our athletes, and it's not just our football team. It's it's with a lot of our student athletes. You take a look at Favor Ash this past week, won the gold medal in the 60-meter sprints at the SEC championship. So
yeah.
You take a look at every athlete in a different mindset and where they want to go. I think more for me, it's more business driven of where they want to go after the game, not necessarily in the game. And, understanding that waking up every morning and making your bed, it seems like a hard task for a lot of these guys, but just make your bed. That's one thing you got done that day. So you've already achieved something, right?
Yeah.
So if you just do little things right, you find trash on the floor, pick it up. Those things matter, and they will propel you to different areas of your life. And I think that's one. I think the other thing is that I actually had a meeting this morning, just a brief little conversation with one of our sports performance coaches, and I'm folding towels this morning. Like, I don't know, it was like 6:00 this morning.
God.
I go, just remember, never forget where you came from. Right. I always tell people that all the time. I go, look, I grew up in the industry of folding towels, doing laundry, cleaning up the locker rooms, and doing those things as a student manager. And I still do those things today. And I'm an associate AD. And the thing that reminds me to do that every day is that I'm not any more important than the next person on my group. So,
yeah.
And that's really what I talk to the student athletes about, is if they have their dreams to ascend to the NFL, get that done today.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it takes.
Yeah. Dana, hold with us. I want you to come back and give people all your information, how they can reach you, and we'll let you go. We have Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports on with the Dogs right after this. Dana Marquez, thanks so much for taking time.
Sure.
Love learn so much. I can't wait to go back and review this show because I will take a lot of notes. But so many people ask me, how do I reach him? Every time you're on, we have a lot of listeners. This goes to 680thefan.com, the podcast park in Atlanta, Radio Alabama, Cookeville, Tennessee, different radio stations. But once it shows up here, it's out there for perpetuity. So for people, I'll tell you that if you're listening, just go to the sidelines.live about an hour after the show. Dana Marquez joined us about 23 minutes into the show. Just listen to this, take notes, but your social media addresses and your companies, and we'll let you go.
Sure. So everybody can reach me at dana@helmetfitting.com. That's my email. And all of our social media network is all done under helmetfitting.com. So there's a lot of new stuff going with helmetfitting.com. HF Innovations, which is where you'll find our new apparel line from Jambies, the new, obviously the Shima 97 mask. We've just brought on Huddlebox, which is new educational based tool for everybody out there in the high school market, elementary schools, things like that. Plus you have the e-learning courses for all the manufacturers on that site. So you can find us at helmetfitting.com in Instagram, Twitter, and obviously on the web. So those are the best ways. And then me, if you want to contact me personally, Dana@helmetfitting.com.
Hey, Dana Marquez, thank you so much man. This is incredible stuff, and look forward to seeing you soon over there at the Starship Enterprise, the Auburn Football Performance Center. So looking forward to it. Have a great day.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate you.
All right, you bet it, man. All right, Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports. covers Georgia Bulldogs for us. And Jordan, hearing a lot about equipment innovations and helmets and safety and 3D imaging. Unbelievable what's going on to make football better. The game is as good as it's ever been. It's getting more popular. And all you do is get to cover the back-to-back national champions who have got their sights set on 3 straight. Kirby Smart, he ain't getting any, he's 46 years old. He's just getting started, really. Been at Georgia 7 years, played for the national championship 3 times in 7 years. And I go back to before Georgia played Ohio State. Some living brain donor on Twitter asked a question, is Georgia considered a blue blood? And I said, of course they are. I asked Tony Barnhart the same question. He goes, of course they are. Well, they're the 9th winningest program in the history of college football. Does Georgia fan base feel like they're pretty damn special? I think they should.
I think so. And I think the big thing that I think people struggle with when it comes to blue bloods and where you put people is the fact that Georgia went so long without winning a national championship. But, I think they were always right there. You think about the fact that they were so close. You think about the dominance in the early 80s with Vince Steele and Herschel. Yeah. They went into a down period in the early 90s, but, you see that with all kinds of programs. Look at Michigan after Lloyd Carr retired. I think it's one of those things people want to, kind of say, all right, well, this is a hard line, hey, these are the blue bloods and we don't think these are. And, you can debate back and forth, but the fact of the matter is Georgia's always been right there. And, I think everybody saw it as a sleeping giant. And, I think the one thing when it comes to Georgia that I'm a little disappointed in that I see with some people on our message board sometimes really running down Mark Richt because he never won it. And yeah, he never won it, but he got awfully close. He came about 5 yards away from winning it in 2012, 2002 when they played Florida. I believe there was an interception where David Pollock handed the ball off to one of his teammates while they said the ball went forward, so it was not a legal play. And, they had ran that play back. Had that play upheld, Georgia would have beat Florida or had a better chance of beating Florida, could have gone undefeated that year. It's one of those things. It's one of those things that's easy to debate and argue about. But, to me, I would say Georgia's right there. And the biggest thing was they were a sleeping giant waiting for somebody to take advantage of everything that they had and all the advantages Georgia had. And Kirby came in and was able to do that.
Yeah, and you talk about cycles. 1982 to 2002, a 20-year cycle. See if you can guess who this school is. In that 20-year period, 82 to 02, they had one season of 10 wins or more. And they're the 7th or 8th winningest program in the history of college football. They got 7 or 8 Heisman Trophy winners. Who is it?
Is it USC?
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan, you're very smart. That's exactly who it is. 20 years. And Pete Carroll comes to town. Remember they beat in his 2nd year there, beat Iowa in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, and he was what, about the 5th choice for that job?
Yes.
Had a lot of people turn him down before Pete got it.
And remember, another one. 1982, Coach Bryant retires after the 21-15 win over Illinois in the Liberty Bowl. 1982 to 2009, Nick Saban's 3rd year, one national championship in that 27-year cycle. Was Alabama considered a non-factor? I think the Georgia deal, you talk about who are some of the greatest hitters of all time that hit 285 to 315. They hit for average just every year they were there. Georgia, if you look in the last from that 1980 national championship until they won it in 21, weren't they the 6th or 7th winningest program in college football? Isn't that good for something? I know you want to win the national championship every year. I'm an Auburn guy saying this, but I know what it means for Auburn to beat Georgia, for Tennessee to beat Georgia, for Florida, South Carolina. I'm saying this, kind of having fun with it, but yeah, Mark Richt. Every time I'm around Lauren Smith, talking to Lauren Smith, usually guess where he's been with Mark Richt. Yeah, Mark Richt. Say what you want. He's as good a guy as there is, and I pray for him every day. I know he's going through his own, battle, but man, you know what he does in Athens. And by the way, why do all those Georgia coaches, Jim Don and Vince Dooley, lived there forever? They all come back to Athens, so can't be that bad. And 41 years, it was easy for Georgia sort of to be the media's pinata, but right now you're feeling pretty damn good. If Georgia wins the third straight national championship, the last time that happened, TV hadn't been invented.
Yeah, I think it was Minnesota. I think Minnesota did it in the early 30s. They may have had a run there. I mean, it's just the run they're on right now is incredible, and that's one of those things. I made sure to tell people on our message board to keep perspective, just because this sort of thing just doesn't happen. And I'm very intrigued what this year's going to look like with everything they lost, breaking in a new quarterback. But there's never been a better time to be a Georgia fan. I mean, you could argue maybe those early 80s with Herschel and with the kind of run they had, but they only won one national title.
Yeah.
Missed out on another chance, I believe, that they played Pitt and Dan Marino. But I mean, it's a special time, and I think a lot of people recognize that and are trying to soak it all in.
Spring practice is about to kick off, and you got basketball. Georgia's got 16 wins in basketball. Of course, baseball just getting started. But you look at a team, and I know this sounds crazy, but I think you can relate to me. You've covered college football for a long time. What do you do to keep these guys hungry? Because for the rest of their lives, some of them are going to have one, maybe two national championship rings. They think they're having a bad day. They can just go look at those and think about what can be if you're willing to pay the price. But here it is, year 3. It hadn't been done since I think the 1930s with Minnesota. I'll have to verify that tonight. But you're Kirby Smart. What are you telling the team on the first day of spring practice?
I think one thing that will make it easier is a problem, not really a problem, an advantage they had last year was that a lot of those guys who played such big roles are gone. And, I don't think it's quite as extreme this year, but you are losing Stetson Bennett. You are losing your starting offensive tackles. You're losing Jalen Carter. You're losing Keely Ringo. You're losing Chris Smith. That means there's a lot of guys that are going to be stepping up into new roles. And I think that that's going to be a piece of the puzzle is that, these guys, the thing that Kirby told us throughout spring and summer last year was we're not defending anything because a lot of these guys weren't, they played, but they were not starters. They were not regular contributors on that first national championship team. And it's a lot of the same. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear a lot of the same with that. And it's definitely going to be the thing talked about with quarterback, because the quarterback's always going to be talked about. We know what Stetson did. And Stetson deserves a ton of credit for that team winning the national championship. I thought he took real significant strides in his super senior season and was heck, he went to New York. He had a great season. And whoever steps in, if it's Carson Beck, who was the backup, who played a little bit, or one of the other guys, Brock Vandegrift or Gunnar Stockton, they weren't really, none of those guys had a big say in Georgia winning that national championship. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing that Kirby's going to stress to these guys is, look, there were really important contributors, Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Smile Munden, Javon Bullard. Those guys are back, but a lot of those guys are going to be starting alongside them this season. We're not playing big roles on last year's championship team.
Yeah, and look now when you think about Georgia, Todd Monken is gone to Baltimore Ravens.
Yes.
Okay, he's gone. So Mike Bobo is going to be the offensive coordinator. Oh well, Kirby just hired him because they're friends. Blah blah blah. Well, Mike Bobo, I think you brought this up. Was it you a couple of weeks ago? Look at the year 2015, the first year Mike Bobo wasn't there. He was at Colorado State. And then I know who had a great year under Brian Harsin? No, it's that wasn't, don't put all that on Mike Bobo. But his body of work got him to be the offensive coordinator for Georgia. With the talent and everything they have going for him, tell me why he's not going to be successful. Why Georgia won't win 11 or 12 games next year.
Yeah, I think anyone who's freaking out about Bobo, I don't think it's called for. And the thing that I kind of keep going back to, as much success as Todd Monken had, great offensive coordinator, I thought he did an outstanding job. those offenses never eclipsed 2014. Bobo's last offense averaged, I think, 41.3 points per game, and Todd's never touched that. I mean, think about, Georgia ended last year's national championship with 65 points and still wasn't able to eclipse that points per game record that Bobo's last offense set. And what I talked about, there were a lot of people that were upset when Mike was promoted, but I talked about this on the podcast we recorded right after, maybe an hour after that news broke. Kirby and Mike are close. They were in Athens at the same time. But let me tell you what Kirby Smart likes more than Mike Bobo or Will Muschamp, those guys. He likes winning.
Yes.
And he's not, and he really does love the University of Georgia. I mean, it's clear from how, and he's not going to put the program or the university in a bad situation by saying, I don't really think this guy's up for this job. I think maybe the game's passed Mike by. But he's my friend, so I'm going to give him this job. He's just not that kind of guy. He wants to win. And I think Mike's up for the job. He's going to be critiqued. But I made this point, too, after the hire. Had Todd came back, it wasn't going to be as good just because of all the talent. They're breaking in a new starting quarterback. They've got new starting offensive tackles. There's going to be a little bit of a dip. Really, the question is how significant. I think they can still put up points. They still got a lot of playmakers. So Mike's going to get criticized, and I think some of it will be unfair because it's just natural with what they lost. You lost a veteran starting quarterback, above all else. But I think he'll do a good job. And again, I want to mention, too, I talked to David Andrews, who's still playing in the NFL with the Patriots. He was a center at Georgia. And he said, look at the talent on the teams I played on compared to these. And he said, we had talent, but if you think that those teams were more talented than what Mike's going to be working with right now, he said, you're crazy. He said, you talk to any of the people that played on those teams. He said, if they think that we were as talented as the talent they got right now, he said, they're lying. And to me, that speaks volumes for a guy who played on those teams. He recognizes Mike's going to be working with a lot more on offense than he did back then.
Yeah, go back to 2019, last 9 games of the season, Georgia would win a typical game 21-12. They jump on you, in the first half, second half, just suffocate you. And you're right. It's all about being relative. Regardless, not having Stetson Bennett, you're going to feel that. But, I just look at big picture always, and those coaches, you're right. Kirby Smart loves winning. He's won everywhere he's been, at Alabama, at Georgia. His first year, there was an adjustment. They went 8-5, but I don't see. I think that's a lot of wishful thinking from people. But you look around at the SEC East, and you say to yourself, our biggest competition coming up. What's going on at Florida? South Carolina is ascending. Tennessee is ascending. Of those two, Carolina and Tennessee, who are you most concerned about? Or are you just going to say, like I would say, I'm concerned about all of them?
I think I would give the nod to South Carolina just because I thought they ended the season really well. Shane's recruited really well. And my biggest question with Tennessee is just replacing Hendon Hooker. We saw some things from Joe Milton. But I think right now I give the nod to South Carolina. And I say that and also want to point out Georgia didn't really have much issue beating South Carolina the last couple of years under Shane. So they've got to make strides. But to me right now, the two teams to watch behind Georgia in the East is South Carolina and Tennessee. Florida is a mess. I don't think they have a quarterback, and I think that's going to be ugly. Kentucky, I'm intrigued by because they went and got Devin Leary from NC State, and they got Liam Cohen back from the NFL. I think he's a really good offensive coordinator.
Again, yeah.
And then outside of that, to me, the two teams are South Carolina and Tennessee. Maybe Kentucky can get in there, but I am very much wait and see because I think Florida is in the middle of a mess just because of losing coaches and really having big question marks at quarterback.
Yeah, they've got to get that fixed fast, or that's going to get worse. And I'm anxious to hear what Buddy Martin says later this week. Got less than a minute to go. Hey, folks, most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. And don't forget, you live in the greatest country in the history of the world. We, the people, go out and give with the expectation of getting nothing in return. Give to give, don't give to get. How can they follow you, Jordan? And look forward to having you on next week with more reports on the Dogs.
For sure. Dogs247.com, on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, and on Twitter at Dogs247. I did want to pass along. Today would have been Devin Willock's 21st birthday, so just want to ask people to keep his family and friends in their thoughts and prayers. I'm sure today's a very hard day, having lost him in January.
Oh God, I can't imagine the whole. Yeah, that's the worst phone call you could ever get. Hey Jordan, great as always having you on, and I'm just again anxious to hear about spring practice going on. But I like your take too about the Mike Bobo bashers. Kirby Smart loves winning. He loves Georgia, but guys like him, listen to what they do. They get it right, back to back, and maybe back to back to back. We'll see you next day tomorrow. Until then, have a great day. We are out of here.